Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas on how to lead your church in the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Whether you're a pastor, church leader, or a passionate member of your faith community, this podcast is designed to challenge, inspire, and equip you with the tools you need for impactful ministry. And now for a little bit about the guest for this episode.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. Today, Loren Richmond Jr. is in conversation with Michelle Van Loon. Michelle's writing is shaped by her deeply rooted faith in Christ, secular Jewish heritage, spiritual hunger, and her storyteller's sensibilities. She has been a regular contributor to Christianity Today magazine and has articles at a number of other digital sites. Her 8 books include her newest, Downsizing, Letting Go of Evangelicalism's Non-Essentials. A reminder before we start today's conversation, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share Future Christian with a friend. Connect with Loren, Martha, and Future Christian on Instagram. Shoot us an email at loren@resonatemediapro.com with comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes. Your support means a lot in making this podcast possible.
Hey friends, this is Loren Richmond. Before we dive in, a quick note. Due to some tech issues during recording, we had to splice a few parts of this interview together. You might notice a few clunky transitions here and there, and we did our best to smooth things out, but we felt that this conversation with Michelle was too important not to share. So thanks for your grace as you listen in. Hello and welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. This is Loren Richmond Jr. Today I am pleased to be joined by Michelle Van Loon. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm so glad to be with you. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to having this conversation. Anything else you want listeners to know about you?
I think we're all going to hear plenty as our conversation continues. So let's jump in.
Let's do it. You know, my previous guest, Martha, my co-host, had with a previous guest, Joelle Kidd, a similar kind of conversation like this, where much of her book revolved around her story. So I don't know if you want to, let's just perhaps, let's jump right in, I suppose. Or I suppose first let me ask this, since this is a question related or unrelated somewhat. Spiritual practices, any kind of spiritual practices or disciplines you find meaningful or you're willing to share?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. Things that have sustained me, which I guess translates to meaningful.
Yeah.
Over the 50 years that I've been a Jesus follower, Bible reading for sure. Whether anything is amazing or new, or whether it's just the putting one foot in front of the other and continuing to journey in the company of Scripture and its author, that has been really foundational through all of the bits of my story and all of the peaks and valleys. I appreciate being able to visit every month with a spiritual director who just kind of companions me right where I am, without judgment, but with just a really intentional set of listening ears that sometimes is kind of all I need to be able to hear God more clearly.
Well, Michelle is the author of the book Downsizing, Letting Go of Evangelicalism's Non-Essentials, which I guess as we're recording this has been out 3 days. Yes. So congratulations on that.
A whole 3 days. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now this is, how many books is this for you? This is a few, right?
This is number 8,
Wow.
which really says more about the fact that I'm a very loquacious person. I have lots of words in me. So,
Well, that is, you said it, loquacious. That is, you do have lots of words in you. So, well, I'm looking forward to having this conversation about this book. And I think that was most interesting to me as I read it is that the book functions like a memoir and a journey from the beginning of the evangelical movement to present day.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was almost like a history of sorts. And I wondered, like, was that intentional?
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate that.
It was intentional. It's not a true memoir because any memoir will not have 200 plus footnotes.
Sure.
It also speaks to the fact that in addition to my many words, I am also a voracious researcher.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm always trying to make sense of my experience and our experience as human beings. And so I use my story as a framing device, but I also use it to be able to introduce people to the various evangelical isms, because there are lots of different shadings within that big, messy umbrella. And so, because I've been everywhere, like Johnny Cash, I've been everywhere, man.
Yeah.
And, really have. So,
Well, why don't you share just a little bit about that journey then, since we kind of teased it already?
okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me. My parents, who are both deceased, were Jewish. I grew up in a fairly secular Jewish household. Kind of think Jerry Seinfeld's parents, and you would be pretty on the money. And I was always a very spiritual, restless person, even as a little kid, and wanted to know God and was very curious and hungry. And that curiosity dovetailed with the tail end of the Jesus movement. In the early 70s, it was popping all around. And I had a friend who came to school one day and told me that she had become a Christian the night before. And I said to her, but everybody here is a Christian except for like us few Jewish kids that are sprinkled in the mix. And she said, no. I started a new relationship with God. All of that language that goes with the Jesus movement. I had no idea what she was talking about, but we continued to have that conversation over the following months as I wrestled with what I thought I knew about God from my limited religious exposure and my own reading of Bible stories as a little kid, matching it with what she said. And we smoked a lot of weed while we did this. And so I always tell people God's word never returns void.
Yeah.
And that includes that, which is not, I don't think, a recognized evangelism technique, but God met us there. He meets us all kinds of places. And so,
Michelle, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We might have to put like
no worries.
We might have to put like a, parental advisory warning on this episode.
I know. Yeah, I don't recommend this, and you won't learn it in seminary, but it's, nonetheless, eventually I've wound my way to a conversation with somebody who was not smoking weed, who was older, who actually knew what he was talking about, which my friend is wonderful. She is. And I saw her this week, as a matter of fact. We don't live in the same state anymore, but she happened to be in my area. And so it was fun to reconnect with her.
Mm-hmm.
But, he said to me, in light of all of your questions, I challenge you to start reading in the New Testament, read the Gospel of John. And I did. And at the beginning of my reading, I didn't believe and I didn't understand why the God that I knew from my Jewish upbringing had a son. And what does this talk about the Holy Spirit? It was all very mind-blowing to me. But at the end, I knew I believed.
Mm-hmm.
There was no Billy Graham moment, no organ playing, no Just As I Am, all of those tropes of kind of mid-century evangelicalism.
Right.
But here I was. But the book starts, that we're talking about downsizing, as that decision led to my parents telling me, as long as you're living under our roof, you cannot go to church. And they hoped they could just starve this out. A fad like hula hoops and blue eyeshadow and bell bottoms and all those things. And I had good sneaking skills, so I still snuck to stuff. But most of my formation in those first 3 years was reading the Bible and learning what it said about church and kind of gleaning from other people's experience and things that I would see on TV or hear on Christian radio. And so when I was free to begin attending church, I was in for some surprises. It wasn't like I imagined. In some ways, there were some things that were better because it was embodied relationships. And in other ways, the book highlights lots of excesses and wrong directions, bad theology. And it looks like I might be losing you.
No, you're still here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll keep going.
Just keep
I'm
going,
getting a message.
If you
Okay.
drop off, we'll go again. Yeah.
Okay. So that journey into evangelicalism led me to all kinds of different church settings. We moved quite a bit. I got married when I was 20. I'm still married. I wouldn't necessarily recommend everybody get married that young, but it's worked out pretty well. We've been married for almost 46 years.
Yeah.
Which we're both pretty stubborn people, which is probably
has something to do with it.
It might have a little something to do with it. But we've been everywhere from very, very conservative circles, Plymouth Brethren and Bible Church, lots of rules, lots of behavior codes, to very wild, charismatic circles, which all of it has kind of morphed together to feed what's kind of blown up in our current time into a pretty big and bad case of Christian nationalism in a lot of those circles.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that stands out from your story is there are many who've deconstructed their way out of evangelicalism, Christianity, and the church. I mean, in your book, you don't pull any punches. Like, you're not skipping around, shining over the challenges and the problems and the abuse and the scandals within evangelicalism, which so often is why people just wash their hands of it and leave.
Absolutely.
What has kept you in it?
I should have a glib, quick answer for that question. I actually think that those first 3 years that I was a believer, where I was kind of on my own, really, there wasn't a community around me. There was nobody kind of telling me, read this or don't read that. I would sneak to the Christian bookstore and I bought all manner of books, from very, very bad theology to very, very good theology. And God God met me there, and he has continued to kind of hold me.
Mm-hmm.
Do I sign off on a lot of what I've experienced and seen? No. A lot is garbage. A lot of it has been deeply traumatic and wounding to people.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of energy invested in building institutions and propping up people that should have been spent, maybe a little more emphasis on the words in the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
And a little less on triumphalism and, winning. So.
Okay, let me ask you a hard question then, as this just front of mind, having just gone in the news, and kind of speaks to what you've already spoken about. I think it was yesterday, the day before, we learned of the passing of James Dobson. And I mean, I think it's hard to, in my estimation, understate how much of an influence he was within evangelicalism and really conservative fundamental Christianity. Being in Colorado, I didn't live in Colorado Springs, but, it was still, even living north of him, it was still kind of obvious what a magnetism Focus on the Family had. I'll be frank, like, I'm not one to dance on someone's grave, but I also want to speak somewhat forthright. So, I mean, what do you think about?
Do it.
Well, I'm asking you. Like, I just think, like, I wrote a note just yesterday. I think it was on Substack Notes about, like, I think he took himself probably too seriously, as perhaps I want to do, and I think he did not recognize the repercussions of everything he said. So, what do you have to add to that?
Well, he is a representative in a lot of ways, and he was a huge influence. I'm 66, so I grew up as a young adult in the ascendancy of the power and influence. It might be a function of my own current social media feed, but I did not see a lot of sadness about the reports of Dr. Dobson's death that hit yesterday. There are people that are mourning him. He was a great man. He was a great servant of the church. I came of age as a young adult in the 80s and 90s. He was everywhere. And when I think of a person and their ideas becoming an institution and a fortress, he is a really good example of that, between Focus on the Family, Family Research Council, even Adventures in Odyssey, all of the conferences he sponsored, or his organization sponsored, as an outreach to parents who had kids in the LGBTQ plus community. No matter what he did, he was a towering figure, and very influential. And the amount of pain that his ideas left behind as a deposit in so many families' lives, including my own, I don't think it can be overstated. The anger and the frustration that is coming out among those who've been wounded by his teaching, the amount of people that are triggered just hearing his name, is not a small thing. That grief and that anger and that frustration means something.
Yeah.
And that's for people like my husband and I, who were looking for guidance on how to parent differently than the households we'd come from, for how to honor God. Everyone pointed us, this is the guy with the answers. He's on the air every day with his warm, voice and his great sounding advice. Some of it was helpful. A lot of it wasn't. A lot of it was harmful. And it fed into the bigger kind of unhealth that is a lot of people are deconstructing from, and have been for the last 20 years. That the word deconstruction is, well, it comes from philosophy, but the word deconstruction as applied to faith, might feel newer than that, but honestly, the rise of the emergent church and some of the questions that people started asking at the end of the 90s and into the 2000s, early 2000s, are all part of the same movement of where we are. And that it's a reaction and a response to the Dr. Dobsons and all of the other kind of characters that I talk about in my book.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it because I think this leads well into other themes you explore in the book. Like I'm thinking of, you write about this tendency within evangelicalism. I mean, really like evangelicalism and fundamentalism. I grew up more in fundamentalism, but they operate with many of the same kind of
There's big overlaps.
Right, a lot of overlap. I wouldn't say they're one and the same, but a lot of overlap.
Sure.
But a lot of the same kind of assumptions and this thing that this need to protect or guard against the evil out there. I know Mike Cosper he did that new podcast series on that kind of same theme. You write about that in your book. Like I'm thinking two things here. One is that kind of need to guard against, and two, which I'm thinking like of other leaders like Bill Gothard. I think about someone who is formative for my own upbringing, like Joshua Harris. This kind of idea, like within those circles of like, we really want someone who can tell us all the answers.
Yes. And for people of my generation, I'm 66. We were looking at, not all of us, I probably shouldn't even use the word we, but I can say me for sure, and a whole lot of other people that I've known, we're looking for structure. We're looking for rules. We're looking for parents, spiritual parents who could guide us, and kind of show us how to navigate in a very unpredictable world, in a very scary world. Although we didn't say we were scared, we didn't even, we were completely disconnected from the idea of that we were animated by fear. So to have somebody say, here are the rules. Bill Gothard is, I have lots to say about him too, but Bill Gothard gave a whole lot of baby boomers and those that came after them the security of being able to know where the lines were, how to color in them, and how to color in them using a box of 8 crayons, no more, no less.
Yeah.
I remember being in kindergarten and when I was a kid and always wishing someone would give me the box of 64. There were always a couple of kids in class, the show-off kids, that showed up with the box of 64. I guess we only needed 32, in our school supply box. So that's what I got. But Bill Gothard said, here's your 8 crayons and here's the lines. And there was a lot of security or it's fake security, because life is never that simple. And the Bible isn't just a rule book of coloring pages. So, I spent time in those circles, in very fundamentalist circles. always with the sense that I was not measuring up. There was no way I could do this right. And at the same time, I had a mind and I was reading and asking questions, and I was married to a guy who loved theology as much as me and was asking questions. And those questions grew us. They didn't shrink us. They didn't require us to give up 2 or 3 more of those 8 crayons. So, you know, and we've also spent time in charismatic circles, not necessarily as a reaction, always longing for connection, always longing for communion, always longing for the family of God to be the family of God. I found pieces, remnants in a lot of those spaces, not all. But it was never the person holding the microphone. It was never the person running the big program, raising money or flogging us onto the next exciting mountaintop experience or whatever the thing was. Those sacred people that showed me the church that I knew I was reading about in the Bible, the flawed and beautiful church. They were there all along, which is why I'm still here.
Wow, you said so much here, and I feel like I've taken this conversation far off script from what I wanted to, and I suppose it's good because I think it's important perspectives, but I got to ask another hard question, and I feel like you're up for it. But
sure.
I'm just thinking about this in this concept of like reactionary, you know, you talk about this seeking security and being animated by fear, all things like no one would admit to, especially, you know, in the 90s. I'm thinking 80s, 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Like, I think, tell me if you don't disagree, but I think it'd be fair to say that in many ways, evangelicalism was a reaction of like the societal disruption. So I guess my big question that I'm trying to get at is like, is the whole project irreparably broken? You know, what?
Right.
And I hate to ask that because like, I'm not like I try not to be like a hot taker evangelical basher.
I think you're asking a fair question. Evangelicalism's roots go back way further than 50 years. Modern kind of post-World War II evangelicalism is what I focus on in the book.
Right.
But that didn't come out of nothing. It was not ex nihilo. There was there's a whole bunch of background and backstory that fed evangelicalism. Billy Sunday was, you know, and George Whitefield, and there's all of these voices that helped to cultivate the soil that then erupted into modern evangelicalism.
Right.
So is the whole foundation bad? A lot of it is not, it's not worth saving. I mean, that's kind of what I say in the book, but there's a big but. That's not the whole story. What another thing that's kind of saved my faith over the years, a good counselor, number one, not gonna lie, spiritual director, good, honest, faithful friends, you know, and some of those examples of people that really believed what Jesus was saying, all of those have acted as salt and light for me.
Right.
The other thing is that I loved church history. I've always loved church history, and being able to read church history and have the long view of what has come before, the corruption, the bad teaching, the heresy, the Crusades. I mean, you can go down the line. Helps me put some of this in perspective.
Yeah.
But it also helps me want to continue to push people and advocate for a church that will exist after I'm gone and after you're gone, which is the central question of the book. What's worth keeping?
Yeah.
We're in a period of downsizing, although if you listen to some people, evangelicalism is bigger and better, and there's some statistics, depending on who's doing the stats and what the lens is, that show that evangelicalism, even in America and the West, is still growing in some places. It's growing a lot faster in the global South, in other places, for sure. And it doesn't look anything like what we have going. There's no focus on the family, edifice in Colorado Springs, for example, in all of these different places in the world. But that said, being able to figure out what is of lasting value, it's just shocking how much, or better said, how little there is. So the answer is there's not nothing, but there's not a lot of where we've invested our energy will not last, and it shouldn't last.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you bring up like the historical perspective, because certainly, like you said, like I'm thinking even the tradition I'm a part of, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, really stems out of like the broader kind of like low E, smaller, lowercase e evangelical movement, which I think we put like Methodism historically with that movement and so forth and so on. But you're right. A lot of the modern trappings have been problematic, to say the least, in those institutions. So that leads me to another question or another theme you talk about in your book. And I'm reminded of this from I don't know if you're familiar with the author J. Michael Jordan, who talks about anxiety and worship and how like the modern kind of evangelical non-denominational service is kind of like predicated on like building like a mini revival service.
Absolutely.
So I thought it was important that you talked about distinguishing between revival and revivalism. Like I've been loosely following the story of Asbury, and I find it compelling. Like, I'm just gonna be honest, I find it compelling, and I think, God, I hope this is real, and I hope do something in my neck of the woods too. But also, I think, like you talk about, there's been this thing of like, can we manufacture revival?
Yes. And depending on who's doing the definition of what revival is, you end up with everything from just a supernatural download of emotional fireworks and all kinds of signs and wonders and people just confessing their sins randomly and healings happening. That's in one stream. In another stream, it's that you end up with kind of like what John Calvin was hoping to create in Switzerland, a society that's just so ordered and orderly, and everybody is following the rules, coloring in the lines with their 8 crayons, that that's what revival looks like.
Yeah.
And you end up with a lot of people either manufacturing it. We're having revival services. To me, every Southern Baptist church that's ever said, we're having a week of revival services, I'm like, I don't think that works that way. But people want goosebumps and they want the next exciting thing. And evangelicalism is notorious for that in all of its different streams. That's for every definition, every wonderful kind of definition of what makes an evangelical, revivalism is kind of the undercurrent, the dark underbelly of some of that description. So
that's good.
Revival in itself is something that makes more sense in retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
It happens. God moves. I believe that that's true. I still believe that that's true. So I was like you, I was very interested when there were these extended services at Asbury and people were coming forward and confessing their sins. And I gave them and continue to give them great credit for recognizing that, of course, everyone came swooping in and rushing in to, try and get a piece of that, take it home with them or make it happen or, whatever the motivation was. And they really tried to make sure that non-famous people and non-celebrities were a part of it. And they tried to steward what was happening as well as they could. And it's like they learned some lessons from all of the bells and whistles and circuses, Christian circuses that had gone before. And was it a revival? Was it just a hiccup? Time will tell how much stands. And that humility is something that's often lacking when revival is talked about.
I'm so glad you shared that point about humility. And as you're talking about revival, I couldn't help but think about a few years back, I was able to be, I'm not sure if you've heard of this place, Cane Ridge, Kentucky.
Oh, yeah. I was baptized in a Christian church.
Okay.
And so, Disciples of Christ. And so I have some experience in that world. Yeah. And Cane Ridge was huge.
Yeah. I mean, I was there and it feels like hollow ground. And
it is.
Wonder, like, maybe there's something in the water there in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also, I remember like standing around that building and thinking like, boy, 200 years ago, roughly it was, if I'm doing my math right, like they were just camping out and stuff started happening and there were no bells and whistles, which I'm going to use as a transition to another thing I want to talk about, because I think that's such an interesting point you bring up about the bells and whistles and the next exciting thing. A few episodes back, I had a conversation with two authors who wrote about, blank on his name now, Crystal Cathedral guy.
Oh, Schuller?
Schuller.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in so many ways he exemplified, maybe not as exemplified, but maybe first really got it started on this bells and whistles thing of like, you probably heard this term before, of like the purple cow obsession in church.
Mm-hmm. And that business of drawing a crowd, and I use every single one of those words intentionally.
Purposely. Yeah.
That business of drawing a crowd has fueled every unhealthy kind of thing that's happened in the church, from the church growth movement, which Schuller was a big part of, to if you look at Charisma magazine, who reports on the charismatic world, anytime that there is a church service that lasts a little too long, or people, there's a stirring of emotions, this is the next hotspot for revival. And it's a drug that they're pursuing the gifts and not the giver.
Yeah.
And that lack of self-awareness that this isn't something we can manufacture, whether it is in a beautifully ordered society like a Doug Wilson keeps pushing for.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got it all over the place. And even though we've touched on a lot of these different names, like from Cane Ridge to Doug Wilson to Bill Gothard,
right.
There's a longing for power and control that is the opposite of what a revived life looks like.
Mm-hmm. I suppose that's a good question here to end this section on. Whether we're talking about Bill Gothard or Schuler or Dobson, there does seem to be this tendency within evangelicalism of, I think you write about a symbiotic relationship between authoritarianism and authoritarian evangelicalism. Again, what do you think?
It goes back to, we're looking for somebody to tell us where the lines are and hand us the crayons.
Yeah.
Maybe you get 12 crayons. Maybe you don't get 8. But it's that desire for control and power. It's in each one of us. I'm not going to just point at this bad leader and that bad leader, because those of us that have been, especially in high control kinds of toxic environments, are responding to the same thing, and the goal should be spiritual health.
Right.
We use the term growth. We use it in terms of church. We use it in terms of spiritual growth. It's not bad, but to become healthy and move towards wholeness leads us in different places than authoritarianism does.
Yeah.
And in church settings, there's no end of people holding microphones and telling us how to live. And we need good guidance. We need shepherds. We don't need the kind of shepherding that I describe in one of the chapters of the book, which was a function of second wave charismatic renewal, that, wow, did it do a lot of damage. And it also created an environment that birthed Christian nationalism. So.
Yeah. I mean, such heavy but important and, wow, important conversations and topics that we could spend so much time talking about. I feel like I need to take a deep breath here, just kind of, I really appreciate the conversation. Again, the book is Downsizing, Letting Go of Evangelicalism's Non-Essentials. Let's take a quick break and let's come back with some closing questions. All right, we're back with Michelle Van Loon. And Michelle, really appreciate your conversation, your frankness, your openness. So you said you're geared up for this one. So if you're Pope for a day, what do you want to do with that day?
Okay, so best question. I love this question. I would be a terrible Pope for so many, too many opinions. But if I had 24 hours, I would make sure I was out there washing some feet. I would get rid of the white outfit because I get stains on myself very easily.
Sure.
I would go find people who had been disenfranchised by the church, and I would ask them to tell me their stories, and I would not rush in with prescriptions. I would make sure I had some Kleenex, and maybe we could use my white outfit that I was no longer wearing as Kleenex. And then maybe to end the day, I would go to a White Sox game. Because the current Pope, I'm from Chicago, and the current Pope was a Sox fan, much to my husband's delight. I'm a Cubs person, but you know, we know about long-suffering, terrible teams in Chicago, like you know, especially the Cubs. But that's how I would end the day. And I'd make it free for everybody who could fit in the stadium, and we would just have a good time eating ballpark food together.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. You know, it's hilarious. Like, of all the problems with the internet, like somehow that someone on the internet found a picture of the Pope at the World Series. It's
Yes! It's so cool.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Epic. Okay, well, I'm going to spin this question that I had for you. So often we can kind of name names and tell stories of all these bad troublemakers in evangelicalism, when I know there's been countless faithful, quiet servants. Who's one or two you'd want to lift up, whether well-known or not?
They are not well-known. They will never be well-known, probably, although I did name one in the book. So I'll start with her. Every Friday morning, just about every Friday morning, including this morning, because we're taping on a Friday, I get on the phone with my prayer partner of 25 years. Her name is Meg Kozlik. And we tell each other the truth about our lives, and we pray. We used to live in the same town, and that connection has continued and continued and continued. We all need someone with whom we can be ourselves. And everyone needs that way more than a good program or amazing worship music or a smoke machine or, whatever goes on in institutional Christianity. We need somebody who sees us and knows us.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is produced by Resonate Media. We love to hear from our listeners with questions, comments, and ideas for future episodes. Visit our website at future-christian.com and find the Connect with Us form at the bottom of the page to get in touch with Martha or Loren. But before you go, do us a favor. Subscribe to the pod to leave a review. It really helps us get this out to more people. Thanks, and go in peace.